Artists, have you ever tried any dry brushing? Hi, my name is Jenny, and I'm going to show you a couple of techniques today on dry brush over underpainting and show you how that's done. I'd also like to talk a wee bit about my palettes and how they're laid out. Most artists have a specific way they lay palettes out. It's totally a personal preference. So I will demonstrate this to you and hope you can get some suggestions out of it. These are my two palettes that I work. The reason I have two palettes going right now is I just finished painting the Indians, and this is the palette that I used. Well, one of many. So I have paint everywhere, as you can see. So what I do is I transfer the unpolluted paint onto the clean palette to start a new painting, or I might have to do that midstream in a painting process because you get mixed paint all over the place. So what you see here is a combination of things mixed together and dipped into, so I can't really use that as an unpolluted palette. This is the palette that I just moved paint to, and I'd like to talk to you just briefly about color layout. Some of you may have your preferences. These combinations right here are all mixed. I took them from the previous palette. This is what they call raw sienna color. This is yellow ochre, titanium white, cadmium yellow deep, burnt sienna, alizarin crimson, cadmium red orange, turquoise, sap green, ultramarine, light green, orange, burnt umber. This is phthalo green. This is, let me see a minute. Okay, this is Prussian blue. This is black, and this is ultramarine deep. So this is the layout that I use. It's just convenient because you know where everything is on the palette when you go to dip into your paint. Just a convenience. So this tutorial is to teach you how to dry brush, or at least the beginnings of it. As you can see on this palette, this is all underpainted. The colors are very flat. There's no defined, really smooth work anywhere on it. It's very rough right now. So all of this wood is going to be antique because this is a deserted house, and I want everything to look antique, deserted, old. So I got to get the effect of peeled paint. So I have this undercoating of this luscious kind of a gray-brown color here. And what I've gone over is I've outlined the areas of where the paint's going to be and the cracks in between where it's peeled up. So on this particular kind of canvas, they call it a gallery wrap. So I have worked the top also, as you can see, on the edge. This way the frame that does not have to be framed. It can be hung just the way it is in the gallery. So a little more on the dry brushing. I use, depending on the area, the surface, how big it is, I use like a little flat brush, usually on small areas like this. Just a little brush. Works very well. Now the trick to this is I haven't oiled the canvas. Sometimes I oil the canvas between the undercoat and the refinement pieces. I do not when I'm dry brushing because you want it dry. The secret is loading your brush so the paint's consistent, and you got to make sure that you don't get too much paint, because if you do, it will paint it, not scumble it. You kind of want to dry brush, scrumble the paint onto the surface. That's the reason we have the darker brown undercoat. We want that to show through. But I said that I had left over from the Indians, so I have some usable paint here that I didn't really want to waste. No use squeezing out new paint when you have remnants of the old. So I used some of the old color, the hues, and put them together. This is the color I'm going to use. It's a combination of white, yellow ochre, and burnt umber. Not very much burnt umber. As you can see, it's very light. So like I said, the trick to this is you load your brush, you go in, you load both sides like that. So you don't really have a lot of paint on your brush, hardly any. While you're painting, turn your brush from side to side so you can unload both sides. Go very gingerly first. Do not scrub the paint into the canvas because it will look painted, and we don't want it to look that way. We want it to look scumbled. These are the outlined areas where the paint's going to go. Notice I've left a little area in between. That's the undercoating that's going to stay there because I want this paint to look peeled and like it's not new. We don't want this welded and new. So my very lightly loaded brush, I'm going to start scumbling, and you can see it's a very, very, very light stroke, hardly leaving any paint at all. Now the lines I put on here to outline it is going to leave some color. So I've noticed I turned my brush. You're going to pick up some of that paint. Notice the undercoating still shows. And where I did make the lines, you want those to be a little more pronounced, but not so much. I need to go back and reload my brush. Let's go up here. Now, this is just the first coat of this. This will probably need multiple coats. This is just the first one over the underpainting. But you can see how that dark line in between will divide those particles of paint that are peeling. So it's left a little bit of wallboard underneath. Now I'm scrubbing and I said not to, so I need more paint. When you start to hear that, you need to go back and get more paint. Now I got quite a bit, so I'm going to go to 2 sections here. And as you work, you can see some of these areas on the edge can be a little lighter. You can narrow some of those spaces a bit. It's total control, but can you see how the underneath is showing through? That's what we want. This is called dry brushing. No oil, just over dry oil, dry paint, oil paint. But no oil applied in between. So you can see where it starts to get a little bit more, makes more sense. And I may not leave all of these areas between, I don't know. If I don't like it, I can go back and put them back. That's the beauty of oil paint. You can play with it till the cows come home and never get finished. But this color here was close to the color of the original wall. Maybe the original wall was a little bit lighter. It's aged. So you can see how it starts to look a little bit more antique-y. So a little bit of paint goes a long way when you're dry brushing. And what I will do is probably go back in some of these areas, put those together. You can see if it gets the design that you try to think about when you're doing this is space. What kind of spaces are you creating? Does it look natural? Some of these areas, as you can see over here, are very large. Okay, so paint doesn't peel in a pattern. I had more spaces over here because probably the light would cause it to peel more from the window. So you can move the paint around on the surface, and it's okay to have it heavier in spots like we did here. Because when I go back, I may even lighten some of those even more. Okay, this is a lighter color. So what I could do is I just wanted you to see the contrast here. Contrast the secret. Contrast, contrast, contrast. I have a friend I kind of help a little bit. I'm always telling her that. She'll understand it. Okay, so I'm not going to leave those rough edges. Pull it down. So there, just a rough idea of dry brushing. Let the underneath show through. I hope this helped kind of define this term to you. This technique is awesome, and use it under underpainting, thoroughly dried, no oil. Thank you.